Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the MDIC Case for Quality Collaborative Community Virtual Forum. I'm Joe Sapienti, and I'm the Vice President of Clinical Science and Technology at MDIC. I'm also overseeing and leading the Case for Quality Collaborative Community. Joining me this morning is Ravi Navar, the Senior Director of Quality for Thermo Fisher, and Ravi is also the Case for Quality Collaborative Community Committee Chair. Good morning, Ravi.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Joe.
So before we get started, I'd like to go over the agenda for today's events. We've got quite a bit of information to share with everyone today. So again, thank you all for joining us this morning and also for joining us for the entire day. This morning's events will start with the Cdrh update by Cisco Vincenti. We're going to have a Make Kappa Cool update along with the ASC pilot, an update from that team. We're also excited to be able to share some updates on Safe Space and the Medias working groups, as well as something else that's new for us this year is the Stakeholder Roundtable, which is our event where we reached out to these small, mid-sized organizations to get their feedback on Case for Quality. We're also very excited to be able to share with you today a case study by W.L. Gore in Advanced Manufacturing. With that event, we'll also be doing a live Q&A, so please stay tuned for that. And then we'll round out the day with a leadership engagement working group. They're hosting a live workshop focused on a chapter within the engagement playbook in developing a quality strategy. So we're very excited to be able to present that material to you today, as well as the live workshop. We think it's going to be a very exciting event and a lot of value-added event. Ravi, any comments about today's agenda before we hand it over to Cisco?
You know, I can't tell you how excited I am to have this forum convene at this time of year. Welcome all the stakeholders from our industry and related collaborative community groups in our continued focus to shift the focus from baseline regulatory compliance to sustained and predictive quality practices. There are some really exciting initiatives that are ongoing within the forum that I am sure that folks will be very interested in hearing about, including the ones that Joe just mentioned, and they span all the way from safe space initiatives and recall to making Kappa cool to engaging more with the supplier community and creating a safe space for sharing valuable information. So I really look forward to this, and I'm really excited about this, and I'm sure this is going to be very valuable to all of our members of the extended collaborative community, which constitutes the case for quality, and this, and particularly in partnership with the Food and Drug Administration and with stakeholders across the entire diaspora of the community, really makes for a very enriching and valuable set of contributions and learnings for all. So welcome.
Thank you, Ravi. So right now I'd like to introduce Cisco Vincenti. Cisco is our program manager for Case for Quality at Cdrh FDA. Cisco, thanks for joining us, and we'd like to hear from you on Cdrh updates.
Sounds great. Thank you, Joe, Ravi, and thank you for the opportunity to come and really talk to the community about what we're looking to do, things that we've accomplished so far. From a Cdrh standpoint and the value of the collaboration. One of the things that I think is worth noting and always important to do is to level set why we're here, what we're doing, what we're engaged in, and the work that we'd like to proceed with moving forward. The first thing is just that idea and reminder, right? The aspect that we're trying to do with Case for Quality is to recognize that compliance is important, but that doesn't necessarily translate directly into quality. It is a subset, it is a foundational base, but really what we're trying to achieve and what we're aiming for is that high quality, safe, effective device for the patient and the user community. You know, Case for Quality, when it started, again, just background for people who might be seeing this for the first time, it was really about addressing that risk to patients that was recurring. Tackling some of the challenges that we found out with some early work in partnership with McKinsey about what was really causing barriers to quality within the device industry. And from that, this Case for Quality community, this complete collaborative engagement to move things forward, to really try to tackle the right problems and come up with what are solutions that really result in a win for everyone across the board are what the case for quality is really about. A lot of the things that we talk about and what we're trying to do today is really about addressing a lot of those challenges and building up that community and its capabilities, right? The driving towards that increased quality for patients in focus, building that more digitally connected community, trying to build up capabilities within industry, within the agency, across the stakeholder base, really trying to do this in a way that is holistic, builds trust so that we can get the right information sharing across the board, because all of the answers aren't held at one particular stakeholder group. Right? It's not like FDA has all the answers. It's an industry has all the answers. We really need to get engaged with everyone who is part of that process in order to come up with ways that will tackle the right problems as we move forward. So, just to highlight a lot of the work that we've done up until now as a community and the value of what it's brought, we've talked about the collaborative community and its foundation, right? This piece of key stakeholder engagement that we've been able to get together and drive in order to continue to solve and bring together the right information set, the right partners in order to make sure that as the problems or the issues that we see arise, we're tackling them the right way, coming up with the right solutions for everyone. We've got our voluntary improvement program, which has really been a big demonstration of the success of that kind of collaboration. The value it's brought to its participants, it brought value to FDA, but it also has spun out several other efforts and activities based on the learnings there. And that's where you'll hear a bit more about the Kappa pilot and its progress and the ASC program and what's going on there. You're going to hear a bit more about the medical device innovation, information and analysis sharing platform in partnership. The intent there is to really start to bring in more of that data and that collaboration in order to better understand and better analyze what are these big ticket solutions that we should be working together towards. And finally, our advanced manufacturing efforts, right? The next piece of that building capability space, right? How do we get more of that technology adoption across the med device industry? How do we get data sharing and the availability for these new technologies to really help advance not just the device quality, but to help lower costs, to drive more resiliency across the supply chain? There's a lot of opportunities in that space that you'll hear about as we move forward, and hopefully really we'll get a great demonstration of during the core use case. So just quickly, where we are on our voluntary improvement program, just to give you the highlights, we've gone through several stages as it's gone through a pilot, and it very recently was operationalized externally. The next piece of that is just the FDA's, really effort to turn it into a policy for our engagement with it. And that's where we are in process right now. We are in the midst of drafting and publishing the guidance, a draft guidance for that for comment, should articulate and highlight a lot of what everybody is familiar with and how the program operates, but now puts it into a policy so it becomes a more official program within the agency's engagement. So stay tuned. That is something that is a high priority for the agency. It is on our A list and it's gone through a significant amount of the process. So hopefully it'll be something that gets released and published soon. See, now you're going to hear a lot more about ASC, Medias, and the Kappa pilot a bit later today. But what I really wanted to just take a moment and point to is some of the work that we're starting up with the advanced manufacturing phase and put it into a bit more of a context. When we talk about advanced manufacturing, the agency does have this definition, more the official definition here. But really what it is intended to be is that idea about leveraging not just the technologies, right? People, processes, methods, ways of doing things that really help drive and improve the quality, safety, manufacturing capability of the products and devices. It isn't a limited activity, and oftentimes the people and the processes are a huge part of that construct and concept for advanced manufacturing. Why? Well, a lot of things that we talked about earlier, right? As we build up more of the capability, we're talking about better connection, better data across the system, lower cost, increased resiliency, information, better empowered user community that can actually help also be part of the solutions that get developed. So it is a really key and integral part of the idea of advancing quality and safety. But it does start out with its processes and getting everything well operating and functional at any organization. So that's, I think, where you see a lot of the synergy with like VIP and some of the other pilot programs that we've got running right now. Just to highlight the work that was done at MBIC, right? The Advanced Manufacturing Technology Landscape Assessment that was recently released. The white paper went out, but it did point to, where are our opportunities to really start driving this adoption, to really drive in some of the technology. This is just a quick summary of it. You can find the white paper on the MBIC website with more depth and detail, but you could see where bringing together some of the technology and that digital connection really helps to start to focus in and drive the control, the just information access, the capabilities that will be foundational to a lot of the work moving forward. And then from a Cdrh standpoint, just kind of put it all together of what we're looking to do with the advanced manufacturing technology efforts. Our goal really is to increase that adoption within the medical device industry for a lot of the reasons we stated above. But one of the foundational pieces really was just working to address concerns on validation, computer safety assurance, things that I think were holding back the adoption of technology and barrier. And we've been working on the guidance with that, but now MDIC really has put forward a partnership and a collaboration within a group of, I guess, very passionate industry members who are really looking to help each other out and really put forward, how do you get this done? How do you adopt this technology in a way that's effective, efficient, safer, and more productive? We've got work that we've done internally to really prove out the idea of what this technology is capable of, and that's where the our ventilated digital twin effort comes into play, and you can find out more about that at another point in time. We are now working on really trying to get to the goal of developing an advanced manufacturing clearinghouse, which will operate independently of just the agency industry. It's a collaborative community similar to this in that concept. The idea there is to help bring together the right partners, not just in the med device space, it could be in other industries too, to really tackle what are some of the barriers to adopting this technology that are going out there. How do we get that done? How do we, as the agency, help facilitate that? And then how do we make it clear for anyone moving forward how they can also repeat the same process or the same activities? And you'll see an idea of how that will work out and what can be done when you get to hear from our speaker from Gore and the work that they did in that use case. So, I really want to thank everyone, not only for the time and effort, but for the continued engagement and participation in the community. It really has made a difference. And I think you can see from a lot of the work that's been done even up until now and what's been achieved, what can be done when, there is that common goal and there is an understanding and a collaboration moving forward. So I think with that, why don't we get things rolling here? And I think we will pass it over to our Kappa pilot team in order to have them highlight what work's been done there and where they are in the progress of really trying to shift the dynamic and understanding of how Kappa gets utilized and applied within industry.
I wanted to thank you for joining us for the MDIC Kappa Process Improvement Program update. My name is Catherine Merrell. I'm a Global Quality Program Director at Medtronic, but also on behalf of MDIC, I'm acting as the Program Chair for the Kappa Process Improvement Program. And now I'll hand it off to Bleda to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Bleda Bonici. I'm with Cdrh. I'm part of the Case for Quality staff working on various activities within the Case for Quality umbrella, including the Kappa Cool improvement pilot.
Before walking through our agenda, I want to preface it by saying it's been a very challenging project, but also a very rewarding one. And the finish line is finally within our reach. So today I will start out by presenting quickly what the Kappa Process Improvement Program is. Next, I'll walk you through the timeline with key milestones, and I'll come back and present the framework benefits that we've been experiencing. And then Bleda and I will both present some detailed pilot data, and then I'll finish on a slide outlining what you can expect next. You may have heard the Kappa Process Improvement Program also referred to as the hashtag Make Kappa Cool program. And at a high level, this program was initiated by MDIC in response to an industry-wide struggle resulting from the current Kappa framework. Namely, there are thousands of employees that love to solve problems, but they don't necessarily want a Kappa. So we've also found that cross-industry best practice recommends a risk-based approach to improvement, and that the focus of the system should be on problem solving to allow organizations to improve faster. You can also see from the images on this slide that the team really wanted to communicate the shift in focus onto problem solving and away from a mostly compliance-focused activity to enable organizations, engineers, and teams to implement improvements faster than what they've seen in the past using the traditional Kappa approach. Before digging into the pilot results, which is what most of you are probably most interested in, I thought it would help to remind you everyone of the process that we've followed to get where we are today. Here's a high-level timeline of our key milestones. So first, back in 2018, we completed a design thinking workshop and benchmarked companies outside the med device space who were known for their continuous improvement systems. We also leveraged all the data that we collected to design a risk-based approach to Kappa and to then develop a pilot rollout plan. At the end of 2019, MDIC published the initial Kappa process white paper, which is linked here, and you can also find it on the MDIC website. And then throughout 2020 and 2021, we've been really busy actively piloting the framework and refining it real time based on our lessons learned. And the good news is we have a second white paper that is coming soon, and we hope a draft will be available in December and that it will be published sometime in the first quarter of next year. It will contain the optimized framework, recommended best practices, and some compliant examples of the various framework elements. Lastly, on this slide, I wanted to give a quick summary of the pilot that we've had so far. We've had 19 pilot sites from 8 different companies. And I will have to say that this team has been one of the most engaged teams that I've had the privilege of working on in the past. The pilot was definitely a success, with us accomplishing even more than we had set out to do. In fact, 100% of the pilot sites have now communicated they're planning on expanding it across their organizations or across their business units. And following the pilot, 3 additional companies have already come forward and reached out to ask for pilot support materials to help them implement the framework even outside of the pilot, which is possible because the framework does meet all regulatory requirements, as Bleda will go over later in another slide. So as we have already presented the framework at previous MDIC forums, and you can see an overview of the framework on the MDIC website, we were planning on just jumping right in and sharing some of the pilot benefits that we've been observing and experiencing. So here's a quick overview. We saw faster Kappa cycle times for lower risk issues. In fact, we saw improvements implemented up to 80% faster. This was due in part to the fact that there was more time spent on problem solving and there was simpler Kappa documentation. In addition to the faster improvements, We also saw clearer Kappa escalation decisions. And this benefit is really notable because it was one of those critical pain points that we had originally identified for the current Kappa process, that it was difficult to know when a Kappa should be opened. We saw more preventative actions considered. And as Bleda will review later, we saw very positive audit results. And then this final bullet, I'll spend a little bit more time on. This one's my favorite. During the development of the framework, the team held quite a few discussions around how the framework could be designed to encourage and reward strong quality behaviors. And I'm happy to announce that the pilot sites actually saw the framework encourage all the connected QMS systems to be strengthened. So, for instance, to take full advantage of the framework, sites found that they had to strengthen their trending process and their action limits. They also saw that they had to implement increased and stronger process controls, such as measuring and monitoring. And lastly, the framework does drive improvements in the risk management systems. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is you'll see from the quotes here that are included from the pilot site leaders, you'll see these benefits really echoed in these quotes that we've collected. So the first one is that Kappa cycle times have been reduced and issues are not being repeated. The next one is it really brought the risk management files to life. It's making the whole QMS stronger. And this is feedback we saw throughout the whole entire pilot, that the framework actually pulled on those areas and maybe highlighted areas that to take further advantage of the benefits of the framework, that it would reward organizations for doing so. And then the next quote was, it's refreshing to move from a mindset of compliance to problem solving. And the last one is that the fast track Kappa is easy to follow and user friendly. This next slide really will provide an overview of key pieces of the pilot data that we collected. First, from the first bar chart, you'll see that we saw significantly faster cycle times. The first chart compares cycle times for each Kappa phase. So you'll see it starts at the time to initiate, the time to implement improvements, up to the overall cycle times. And it compares them between the baseline Kappas and those of the pilot. And overall, we actually saw about 60% of the pilot improvements completed in less than 60 days, which is a really significant benefit. And it also meant that those fast track Kappas that we were opening took less than 2 months to close. And overall, improvements were implemented between 50 to 80% faster than the baseline, which was one of the key goals of the team, was to enable faster implementation of improvements. The other thing that we looked at is overall, the improvements were implemented an estimated 50 to 80%, well, 50 to 75%, reduction, a reduced number of required resource hours or FTEs. So in addition to being implemented faster, there was less burden associated with those implementations. The bottom section of this slide really highlights that we saw almost 3/4 of the Kappa decisions, or about 74% of the Kappa decisions, could be made by individuals instead of requiring a Kappa board. And this was an increase of about 15% of the simpler decisions, of that it was clearer when to open a Kappa, and when they did have to open a Kappa, it was really clear what type of Kappa was needed. So it was easier for users to see how to navigate through the Kappa process. And finally, we saw that almost 80% of today's issues could be managed using the fast track Kappa path. So next, I'll hand it over to Bleda to take you through an overview of the audit data.
Thank you, Catherine. As Catherine has mentioned, applying a risk-based approach is in line with regulatory requirements. FDA's expectations of risk management include essential practices such as risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk controls, which are intended to be a framework to successfully manage risk throughout the product lifecycle. And it does not end with the design and production of the medical devices, but it continues on into post-market operations, including practices and procedures for identifying, for analyzing and controlling and monitoring risk throughout the product lifecycle. This is also aligned with ISO 14971, which requires risk management to be fully integrated into the established quality management system. So therefore, it is no surprise what we heard from different auditors that audited some of the Kappa systems of the sites that have been enrolled in the Kappa pilot. They thought that this is an interesting and exciting pilot, and they liked the faster turnaround of the low risk Kappas. It is also not a surprise at all that out of the 32 audits that were completed during the Kappa pilot cycle, no Kappa related observations or nonconformances were noted. And that's partially because we did a lot of work in the beginning of the pilot as we designed the framework to ensure that the framework not only meets the regulatory requirements, but it also talks to or addresses some of the pain points that we heard in the beginning or prior to even initiating the pilot. So we've gathered great input as Catherine has walked through in the last couple slides. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine to let you know what you should expect next from this work.
Thank you, Bleda. For those of you who would like to learn more about the framework, you can visit the MDIC website where there's an online training and you can have access to the initial white paper with the framework. Also, the final white paper is being written and we're hoping it will be released in the first quarter of next year. And if you do have any specific questions or you would like access to the pilot support materials, please reach out to us and we are definitely here to help you out. So with that, I would like to thank you again for joining us and to let you know that we're looking forward to hearing about new success stories as organizations begin to use the new framework across the med device space. So I wanted to thank you for joining us for the Accelerate Sustainable Capability Pilot Study presentation, which is also known as the ASC Pilot Study for short. My name is Catherine Merrell. I'm a Global Quality Program Director at Medtronic, but also on behalf of MDIC, I'm acting as the program chair for this pilot study. Now I'd like to turn it over to Bleda to introduce herself and to kick us off.
Hi, I'm Bleda Vinici. I'm with the Case for Quality staff within Cdrh. I'm one of the team leads working on various Case for Quality activities, including the ASC pilot, which we'll walk through today during this presentation. So the pilot is facilitated by MDIC. The FDA's participation in the ASC pilot is one of the examples of our continued efforts to ensure patients and providers have access to safe and effective, high-quality medical devices. This pilot leverages what we've learned from the Voluntary Improvement Program, or some of you might know it as the VIP pilot or program. And it is an opportunity to partner with organizations to address compliance issues and improve product quality. There was definitely a need of new tools to elevate an organization's quality maturity and foster continuous improvement throughout the product lifecycle. We want to focus beyond the regulatory requirements and drive continuous improvements within the organizations that are enrolled in the pilot. The use of the CMMI appraisal process and the residual risk assessment does just that. These tools are intended to help focus and support the organization's improvement efforts and complement some of the work that may have already been initiated to address the compliance violations previously cited by the agency or other regulators within the industry. The ASC pilot is an opportunity to work with the agency in a different venue, which in turn may also help strengthen the partnership with the FDA. On the other hand, for the agency, We'll continue to meet the missions by proactively engaging with the participating sites and getting them in a state of sustainable compliance, but also promote continuous improvement and organizational excellence to drive beyond that baseline compliance state and focus on the continuous improvement efforts within the life cycle of the product that are in the field. FDA, so both ORA and Cdrh, are engaged and have been a part of the ASD working group since the inception of the pilot. And we are fully committed as well as supportive of these activities. I will now turn it over to Catherine to provide a pilot overview as well as provide updates on what has occurred until now and where are we going next.
Thank you, Bleda. The last time we presented on this topic at the MDIC forum, we were just starting the work. So now we're pleased to announce that the ASD pilot study is off and running. So in this presentation, I'll provide a brief overview of the pilot, as well as to dig into the expected benefits for the participating sites. I'll also go over the resources that are available for pilot sites. And then I'll go over and give you a little bit more detail about how you can join us in the pilot. So I want to start out my overview by saying that there are 5 pilot slots still open. I'm starting out with this in case there are any eligible sites who are listening who may want to participate. So there are a total of 9 sites allowed. 4 of the slots have already been filled, and we have 2 that are currently in the application review process. We're looking for 2 or more sites that are self-identifying, 2 or more sites with 483s but no compliance action, and 2 or more sites with an advisory action like a warning letter or an untitled letter or a regulatory meeting. So first, I wanted to go over the main pilot elements. So to start with, if your organization does prefer to keep your enrollment confidential, this is definitely an option. It's an 18-month pilot study after your initial CMMI appraisal. And the CMMI appraisal process is very similar to VIP or the Voluntary Improvement Program, but it would be focused on those processes that were identified with compliance concerns. There's also a quarterly residual risk assessment using publicly available MOD data. And this is new compared to the VIP program, but still similar to VIP, sites will complete a quarterly report of progress to the CMMI. Also similar to VIP, there will be quarterly report of metrics to the FDA, also targeted on those processes that were identified with compliance concerns. Throughout the pilot, there will be an ongoing collection of lessons learned from the pilot sites. And at the end of the pilot, only if applicable for non-self-identifying sites, there will be a reinspection. So for those of you who are familiar with VIP, it is like VIP, but the work will be targeted at those processes impacted by the compliance concerns. So next, I'll review the pilot site expectations. So we'll start with the action plan. This includes the compliance gaps, which have to be addressed. Next, there's the residual risk tool input that will help the sites prioritize those improvement opportunities that were identified by the CMMI appraisal. Second, there are quarterly checkpoints with CMMI, and this is where the action plan status will be reviewed and the performance report metrics will be provided as well. And finally, as with VIP, there's an expectation of transparency during the pilot to enable the site to better partner with the FDA as they improve. So now we get to the good stuff. This slide will capture all the reasons that the working group feels it's a strong pilot opportunity for those sites that are focusing on achieving greater levels of compliance. So namely, the pilot was intentionally designed to support an environment of collaboration, especially within the regular touch points with the FDA, which would enable clearer expectations and alignment around the site's action plan. And the site will also benefit from the organizational excellence improvements to help sustain those compliance gap closures. And the residual risk assessment can help the sites prioritize what to improve first. And I did want to note that the intent of the appraisal is to improve both the QMS processes and the business processes that support it to support improved product quality. And finally, this is an opportunity to help shape how the sites could potentially be supported on their improvement journey in the future. And let's not forget that the cost will be fully covered by MDIC, which is an excellent benefit. To support the sites participating in the pilot, resources have been developed by the working group, such as a detailed playbook, some standard templates, the residual risk tool information. And I also wanted to note that the pilot is being completed following a detailed program definition document just to ensure site-to-site consistency. The participating sites also have ready access to pilot site support. For instance, they have access to the MDIC ASC working group, as well as the MDIC ASC sponsor working group, which really is in place to maintain the confidentiality requirements of the participating sites. The sites will also have access to the support from their CMMI lead appraisers, as well as management control and the FDA. So I also wanted to highlight finally that the pilot will be improved in real time in responses to those lessons learned that are collected from the sites. And this really is because we want to make sure that the ASC pilot is providing real value added to each of the participating sites. Okay, the last slide I wanted to share with you comes directly from our participating sites. Although the feedback is anonymous, we thought it would be good for you to hear directly what the pilot sites were saying. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 sites in the program, with 2 having already completed their CMMI appraisals. As you can see where each site is on the timeline here at the top of the slide, they're designated by the teal dots. You've got all of them have been enrolled. You have a couple of them that have completed their residual risk assessment, and 2 of them have completed their CMMI appraisal. As you can see from the first column, we asked the sites, why did you decide to enroll? And I'll just summarize these at a high level. The responses we received were that it provides an evaluation of quality system maturity. They thought the collaboration with FDA and the alignment on the action plan was definitely what they were looking for, as well as the waived routine inspections they felt would help them focus on their improvement plans. And then the next response we received was that they were looking forward to the benefits that the ASC pilot program could provide to work collaboratively with the FDA and other stakeholders. Next, we asked them how were the inputs from the CMMI appraisal the same or different than inputs that had already been identified through the audit process. And the response we received indicated that they did identify in the CMMI appraisal some opportunities with low compliance impact. Some of them were new to the site, but some of them were in areas that were similar to what was already considered for improvement. But they felt that the appraisal team allowed the site to focus their efforts and formalize their improvement projects. The next question we asked the sites was, what value have you gained from the residual risk assessment? And both responses we received indicated that they didn't identify any new areas requiring action when they compared them with their existing post-market surveillance process. So no additional actions were identified for both the sites that did respond. What is something that you wish you knew before joining the pilot was the next question we asked. And the first site that responded indicated they wanted to know more about the CMMI appraisal process because they were looking for how does that preparation, what preparation is required for the appraisal. And then the next feedback indicated that they thought it would be helpful to get feedback from other sites that had gone through the program. And the final question that we asked was, what would you say to people who are deciding whether or not to join the pilot? The responses we received indicated that it's a great opportunity to partner with the FDA to improve the quality system processes and compliance using a best practice approach. And the next response we received was the pilot is an opportunity for a site that may be in remediation mode to also think about how continuous improvement focus can help to improve the quality of products. So those are some really good feedback pieces that we received. So before we close, I wanted to encourage any eligible sites to consider applying for the pilot. If you're interested in learning more, you can visit the MDIC website and review the pilot support materials that are available there, such as the playbook, a webinar, and some FAQs. Finally, feel free to contact us with any questions you may have because we're here to help. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to any of you who would like to participate in the pilot.
All right. Hello, everyone. We're here today to give an update on the Safe Space pilot. My name is Catherine Mack. I'm from Stryker, and joining me with this update is Mark Retkovitz from Innovise. The agenda for today has primarily focused on an update, and with the update, we'll be providing answers to the questions: what is Safe Space? How does it work? Where have we been with the Safe Space project? Where are we going? What are our early takeaways thus far with the project? And how can today's meeting attendees learn more? Our desire and hope with today's presentation is for you to get interested in the pilot and to follow its progress. The pilot has potential to build trust among us as medical device industry professionals and our community, and hopefully to improve patient safety. Underlying today's discussion are a few plain images, and that's because our Safe Space pilot is modeled after what's been done in the aviation industry. The next slide is going to answer the first question: what is Safe Space? The mission of Safe Space is to establish a trusted environment so that both manufacturers and government can share issues and best practices to improve device quality and to improve patient safety without any fear of punitive action or to impact anyone's competitive advantage. We started working on this just in January of this year. So probably going through your head is the question, who? Who are the working group members of Safe Space? The working group members are listed on this slide. It's a mixed team with representation from large to medium-sized companies, the Food and Drug Administration, and a public-private partnership member, MDIC. The group is anticipating opening its doors to new members in the near term. We're currently developing our onboarding process for new members that might join our group. So let's get into some specifics and get deeper into the Safe Space project. How does Safe Space work? Well, as mentioned at the start of this discussion, the way we work is modeled on other similar and successful programs, such as aviation, where accidents have been significantly reduced in the last 25 years. We've met with aviation subject matter experts, such as those from the FAA and the airline industry. We heard how they were able to start up and sustain similar collaboration forums for what we vision with Safe Space in the medical device industry. Based on that, we're taking a methodical approach with 4 swim lanes or focus areas where we first identify issues for collaboration, define the scope, conduct our analysis, and finally communicate our findings. For example, in the way we work, we identified topic areas for collaboration and 16 prospective topics emerged in this phase. I'm going to pause for a moment. Mark, what would you like to add about the 16 prospective topics that have emerged as we've gone through this disciplined methodology?
Yeah, the process that we've gone through, it's been really interesting that, a lot of brainstorming and between the medical device industry experts, the FDA has a great inputs. And then also one of the positive areas that I don't think it's ever happened before is getting somebody on the provider side and like the hospital and what they think is an issue that we were trying to prioritize. And so they actually provided a great view of this information during the pilot as we were going through the scoping and analyzing phases.
Great. Thanks for that, Mark. Well, the next question is, we've got this methodology established. We've met with other people. Where are we going? What is this methodology uncovering? Based on the 16 prospective topics, we're narrowing our focus to a single topic, recall procedures, and to two specific questions associated with the topic. Those questions are, how have people historically made recall decisions and with whom? And how do hospital decisions about recalls change based on recall notices, content, and communication? Our single topic involved identifying data and resources needed, assumptions, and the timeline we need to work the topic. This topic has allowed us to learn more from hospitals, and we've listened to those groups describe their process once a recall notice is sent by a manufacturer. Mark was describing earlier our meetings with healthcare providers. Currently, we're analyzing and generating results. We have 3 subgroups who are at different stages. We are excited about our progress, and to get more specific, our 3 subgroups are analyzing FDA's May 2020 guidance on recalls, such that we have the opportunity to increase awareness of that guidance and find ways of accelerating communications between manufacturers and FDA. We also are analyzing, standardizing communication templates for manufacturers. And thirdly, we're able to research some possible electronic communications between manufacturers and healthcare providers on recalls, such that recall information is communicated much faster to enhance patient safety. And Mark, I think this would be a great time for you to hop in and talk about a little bit more about perhaps what you've seen with standardization or these other 2 possible areas where we're diving deeper.
Yeah, the sub-team we worked on was on standardizing recall templates. Now, one of the things we looked at was, what does a standard recall letter look like? And a lot of it is based off what's in the FDA guidance document, because they sort of list a letter. But as we were going through the whole process of looking at that, somebody brought up, this is what my automotive recall was, and it sort of told me exactly what to do, versus a letter is sort of, you got to sort of figure out in the letter what you're supposed to do. So it's like, let's apply some technical communication concepts to this to basically have the user that gets the letter know what's exactly to do. And so we come up with some templates that are actually, depending on who gets it, is it a distributor, is it a hospital, or is it a patient? Because recall letters, depending on the products we make, medical device makes all kinds of products, the format may be different because the users are different and they're doing it differently. And one thing we learned about what hospitals do is they have each hospital is slightly different, but there's a lot of, it's just like another medical device company. There's a lot of methodologies and processes that they use for the letter. So the templates that we came up with were sort of optimized more for the different types of groups. And so this is something we're looking at is, can this optimized letter actually provide better recall responses from hospitals and patients and distributors? So it was a very positive experience of trying to build out new templates and seeing, and we have to get to a point of validating that this actually provides a better response. But it's a good start and different way of thinking of things than just sort of, while the FDA is just trying to give you an example, it's not necessarily what's going to always work.
All right. Well, we're all optimistic about where this can take us. So not only are we working on standardization, the guidance, and perhaps electronic communications, we do know we have more to do. For example, we need a communication plan. We also need a knowledge management plan so that we have a history of our work and we can look back and remember what we've done. In summary, with this methodology, we cast a wide net and identified many potential areas of collaboration and chose recalls as our low-hanging fruit for the Safe Space pilot. It allowed us to start right away while also working on other things like our governance framework. And you've probably heard this phrase before, we're building the airplane as it flies. So what are the outcomes? What are our key takeaways thus far? When we do a recall, it's a tense time for all involved. No matter who you are, manufacturer, distributor, hospital, physician, patient, regulator, everyone is impacted. There will always be recalls, and there's benefit to us working together collaboratively across all stakeholders to make improvements such as the patient safety is enhanced. The work that we're doing in Safe Space in the pilot, it's not always easy work. We've had highs, we've had lows. Some days are better than others, but we're sticking with it. And at the end of the day, it's working, and we're happy in the investment we've made so far. So we've built a lot of trust within this group. We're learning that manufacturers definitely want to participate and are engaged in this collaborative environment. Many topics have been identified for exploration, and we're starting to hone in on practical techniques of improving recalls. So finally, to wrap it up, to learn more about Safe Space, what the audience can do is look at the FDA guidance on the recalls and corrections and removals. I didn't provide the link, but if you Google it, it'll come right up to your screen. Also, it's a good time to reach out to those individuals on the Safe Space working group, give them some of your insights and thoughts on these topics. And also stay tuned for more updates from us on the Safe Space pilot. Well, I hope that you and I enjoyed listening to Mark and I describe the Safe Space pilot. Hope you're enthusiastic about it like us. And we look forward to hearing your questions and thoughts. And thank you very much for listening to our presentation.
Good morning and happy holidays. I'm Mike Rulin, a pediatrician by training and Vice President Medical Education at Atrium Health System in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm pleased to serve as co-chairman of Medias Governing Committee. Medical Device Information Analysis and Sharing Initiative is a voluntary partnership between government and the private sector. It was formed to provide enhanced systemic medical device data sharing, analysis, and utility. The concept for Medias stems from the recognition that data from a wide variety of sources can provide greater insights than data from a single source alone. Currently, information about medical device safety and quality exists across the medical device ecosystem, but it is not openly shared. This results in missed opportunities to collaborate on resolutions to mutual and systemic problems, potentially leading to inferior outcomes for our patients. With Medias, we envision a community of medical device stakeholders, such as manufacturers, providers, and government entities, contributing data for aggregate analysis and benefiting from the discovery of common quality and safety issues that span the medical device ecosystem. Since fiscal year 2020, Medias has been executing a proof of concept, or POC. This POC provides us with the opportunity to work collaboratively in testing how the Medias partnership model could operate and whether it could advance device quality and patient safety. We're starting small, working with the early adopter organization to focus on tangible results that demonstrate the value of Medias. Specifically, we are focused on building confidence and trust between participating organizations, enabling collaborative decision-making, and testing the feasibility and value of collecting, analyzing, and synthesizing data across the medical device ecosystem to achieve tangible results. The proof of concept has been divided into two phases. The focus of phase 1 was to conduct studies using FDA public data sources, while in phase 2, we plan to use non-public data from Medias partners. Over the past year, the Medias early adopters conducted 2 initial studies for phase 1 of the proof of concept, which ended September of 2021. These studies were chosen in order to build a singular database comprised of public data sets with high relevance to medical device quality and patient safety. Additionally, the studies provided an environment for the partnership to exercise its collaborative decision-making and analytic approaches. The 2 initial studies used public data from FDA, including referrals, MOD, and recalls. Each study was conducted by a sub-team of Medias early adopters in direct coordination with analysts from the Medias trusted third party, who were responsible for safeguarding Medias data, performing objective analysis, and generating aggregated results for partners. The trusted third party conducted the initial analysis using the data and then shared interim results, which were validated and interpreted collaboratively by each sub-team during regular working sessions. The analytic outputs of the studies, such as data visualizations and benchmark results, do not singularly identify any particular partner, while also providing valuable insights that are relevant to all partners. Let's take a closer look at each of these studies. The root causes of recalls study helped Medias to understand certain trends and outliers in recalls. Medias used data visualizations to explore, categorize, and describe trends in root causes of recalls from 2010 to 2019. This time period was selected for analysis to holistically assess recall trends since FDA published its 2011 report on understanding barriers to medical devices and to account for limitations of the public data sets. The use case working group executed the study from November 2020 to May 2021 in collaboration with the trusted third party. The outputs were shown using the tool Tableau, which enabled the early adopters to see dimensions of analysis in a dashboard format. The dashboard also included additional filters to further explore the data. Results of this study were, number 1, visualizations that display the distribution of recalls in terms of 7 dimensions of analysis, such as medical specialty and recall class. These dimensions provided different ways to categorize and examine trends in root causes. And number 2, benchmarks that allow individual early adopters to view the recall distribution for devices compared to the industry as a whole. Now let's take a closer look at each of these studies. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to my colleague and co-chair, Rob, who will walk you through this information set.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Rob Crone, and I am the Global Regulatory Compliance Manager at Boston Scientific. Medias' second study was evaluating if MDRs are predictive of recalls and to what extent. Medias applied data science to 1, identify factors most associated with future recalls, and 2, predict devices with a high probability for recall. The factors associated with a higher probability of future device recalls include past recall metrics, past MDR metrics, and device characteristics. Using the 2010 to 2020 time period, data was aggregated into quarters, and then the model used an 8-quarter window to predict recalls in the following year. The use case working group applied data modeling capabilities and visualizations to assess early indicators and features to correlate with historical recalls, and with models that could work using public data. The model results can predict 75% of recalls and 58% of non-recalls for devices. The findings show that MDRs can help predict recalls. Past recalls and device characteristics are also predictive of recalls. The model could be matured with the incorporation of additional data sets. The findings from these studies have given the early adopters valuable insights into these 2 areas. For example, one early adopter commented, "What we're able to see in these use case studies was a totally new view we've never seen before, and the level of analytical rigor has changed how we view our own metrics." These studies have also served as building blocks for Medias capabilities. They lay the groundwork for establishing trust among participating organizations and shows Medias' ability to enable collaborative decision-making. The lessons learned from these studies were leveraged as Medias embarks on phase 2 studies that incorporate non-public data from Medias partners. In order to transition from phase 1 to phase 2, the Medias trusted third party hosted the 2nd annual summit for early adopters and Medai's proof of concept supporters from June 22nd to 24th, 2021. The 3-day entirely virtual summit enabled participants, which included industry, a healthcare provider, and FDA representatives, to review progress for phase 1 and to begin preparing for phase 2. During the Medai Summit, early adopters had the opportunity to review and modify the existing success criteria for the proof of concept to ensure that it aligns with their current thinking. Early adopters also participated in ideation sessions to identify phase 2 studies. Many ideas were proposed for these studies as part of a breakout group discussion. These ideas were then shared with the larger group of summit participants. The trusted third party worked with Medai's early adopters to organize, refine, and evaluate the list of ideas by looking at their feasibility, how valuable they are to the medical device community, and how much they build off the progress made in phase 1. This led to generating a list of potential phase 2 studies. Additionally, the summit allowed early adopters to identify lessons learned from phase 1 to incorporate into phase 2, meet the newly formed Medai's governing committee, and hear testimonies on why this work matters to healthcare providers, regulators, and medical device manufacturers. Some key takeaways from the summit include excitement was expressed about Medai's. Some participants expressed their optimism and enthusiasm for the direction Medai's is pursuing and the work accomplished by the partnership to date. Specifically, the participants felt that the use case working group made good progress on the studies. Early adopters are forming a healthy community that some participants express as meaningful. While the forming stage of the partnership has taken time, the genuine relationships are being built and the tone of the group was positive. Participants look forward to phase 2. There was definitely a feeling that phase 2 will be a pivotal time for Medai's. Participants uniformly had high expectations for phase 2, and they had a variety of priorities for phase 2. Some early adopters felt that phase 2 would be a time to continue to build upon the work that has been done to create community within Medai's and demonstrate the trusted third party's competencies for data stewardship. Some early adopters also emphasized that phase 2 studies should focus on solidifying the value proposition of Medai's through achieving a novel research result using non-public data. In phase 2, Medai's is exploring the incorporation of non-public data from early adopters into its studies. The use of non-public data will require formalizing partnerships through Medai's. Formalized partnerships will be accomplished through collaborative agreements. Key activities in phase 2 include continuing non-public data sharing discussions with early adopters. Over the last several months, the trusted third party has been actively engaged in discussions with 5 Medai's early adopter organizations, including the FDA, on non-public data sharing for the Medai's phase 2. The trusted third party is exploring key questions such as how will each data source be de-identified prior to and or during its residency with the trusted third party. These non-public data sharing discussions are not just critical for executing phase 2. We're building a framework for how Medai's partners will share data moving forward. These non-public data sharing discussions are a basis for that framework. Reviewing phase 2 studies with the governing committee for their selection. Studies for phase 2 are currently under review by the governing committee and will be prioritized based on potential for impact, feasibility, and risk. These activities will continue into 2022 as Medai's moves through phase 2. If you have any questions or are interested in learning more about Medai's, please reach out to caseforquality@meter.org. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pat Schaefer. I lead our regulatory and quality practice at FTI Consulting.
And hi, my name is Steve Silverman. I'm the president of the Silverman Group, which is a consultancy for the medical device industry.
It's a pleasure to be here today. The purpose of this particular segment is to inform you about the effort to broaden stakeholder engagement with the MDIC programs. What we have noticed is that while the programs currently are very supportive of larger, more mature medical device companies, we don't really have that much participation from pre-revenue and small and mid-sized companies. So this whole initiative has been an opportunity to explore how to, as I say, broaden that engagement. One of the reasons is that much of the innovation comes perhaps from these small, innovative companies and are often acquired by the larger companies. So it's in everybody's best interest to establish an effective quality capability early on. What we're exploring are the current work streams with Case for Quality inclusive of all of the critical stakeholder groups? And if so, how do we broaden participation? If not, where are there gaps? And what can we do to basically further align those programs with the needs of the broader Case for Quality collaborative community?
As many of you know, the Case for Quality collaborative community, as Pat mentioned, or CFQCC, brings together medical device stakeholders to find and develop strategies to strengthen device quality and patient safety. Importantly, in addition to device makers and healthcare providers, this initiative includes FDA. FDA, working side by side with stakeholders, expands the solutions generated and shows the agency's commitment to the CFQCC. The CFQCC has sponsored multiple projects like the Voluntary Manufacturing Improvement Program and the Quality Culture Initiative. And both the CFQCC and its programs are open to all. But again, as Pat mentioned, while we do have participants that range from small, specialized firms to large device makers with a global footprint, in practice, most CFQCC participants fall into the large company bucket. That's not the diversity that we want and that we need to assure that the CFQCC reaches all stakeholders. So recently, we focused on outreach to small and mid-sized device makers. We've been critically helped in this effort by AdvaMed's Excel program. AdvaMed Excel focuses on small, mid-sized, and emerging medical device companies. This is the audience that the CFQCC is targeting at this point to expand its reach and impact. And with those objectives in mind, earlier this year, the CFQCC convened a roundtable discussion with leading AdvaMed Excel members. This discussion focused on ways to build the CFQCC through outreach to small and mid-sized device companies. And in a moment, Pat's going to provide a detailed review of both what we asked and what we learned in response. Next, building on this feedback, we're now developing a survey targeting small and mid-sized device companies, as well as companies that are more in the quote-unquote startup phase. And we'll ask many device companies to respond to this survey. Like the roundtable discussion, we'll ask what quality means to these companies, how much quality drives their business decisions, and how the CFQCC can best engage them. And we're going to use these survey results to develop programs tailored to small and mid-sized companies. The goal, of course, is to assure that the CFQCC reaches all device companies across the product ecosystem.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we heard during this roundtable, which, as Steve mentioned, really was CEOs and quality organization leaders of a range of companies, all board members. What we asked at the highest level was, where is your firm today with respect to quality? What does quality mean to you? What does compliance mean to you? We then asked, is device quality a meaningful goal for your firm? It is, certainly something that the larger companies have established and woven into the fabric of their companies. However, smaller companies are probably more focused on, getting their product approved and onto the market. And so we really wanted to pressure test the importance of quality for an evolving firm. And then finally, we wanted to explore what would it take for these smaller firms to get involved in a device quality initiative such as those that MDIC offers. And what we heard, actually, we had a very engaged discussion that went back and forth. The most fundamental piece was that MDIC needs to improve communication, awareness, and promotion of the existing programs. There is already a wealth of best practices and workshops and efforts to improve quality across the industry as a whole. And just knowledge of that would be a benefit to these smaller companies. So again, focusing on communication and outreach is a good first step. But there were some issues. One of the issues is that smaller companies may not have the capacity or bandwidth to really pursue some of these initiatives. Also, companies are in different phases of evolution, and a company that is still exploring early product design as part of an incubator or an innovation center may not really be interested in a robust quality management system at that point. However, at some point, it's going to be very important to focus on the quality management system as they go through the development process. So scoping the projects and the initiatives that MDIC is offering to the different phases of business evolution is going to be incredibly important if, in fact, these are going to be fit for purpose for evolving pre-revenue and small and mid-sized companies. There is a recommendation to focus on efficiencies and improvements and reduce overhead, which really applies across the board. Also, because many of these smaller companies are working on paper and very inefficiently, a look to move to digital solutions and paperless processes as they evolve would be particularly appropriate for this constituency. And finally, everyone is interested in exploring appropriate uses of machine learning and artificial intelligence to basically automate those processes which can be automated, not only in terms of product development and how the product operates, but also in terms of the regulatory and quality processes that accompany the product development. There was also recognition of the trend towards use of software as a medical device. And so while many of the programs look traditionally at physical and traditional medical devices or even combination products, the fact that many of these devices are now purely software-based as apps on smartphones or other platforms, how can we adapt the initiatives to support those companies as well? And then finally, there was an extended discussion around this issue of compliance versus quality. One of the hypotheses has always been that if you improve quality, compliance is an inevitable byproduct. But it was observed that in some cases, companies that are overly focused on continuous improvement and don't keep an eye on compliance may find themselves in hot water as well. So again, I think balancing this focus on compliance and quality as companies move to pursue continuous improvement is going to be critically important. Steve, let me open it up to you, see if you have any thoughts on any of these pieces.
Thanks very much, Pat. I actually agree very much with the points that you raised, and I think that you addressed them very correctly. I also agree that recognizing that for some companies, there's not as much sensitivity to this issue of quality and that they think in terms of compliance rather than quality is a very important issue, as well as the point that you raised, Pat, about what moving towards quality means and the need to be attentive simultaneously to compliance, whether that compliance happens, as you say, as a result of the push towards quality, or whether or not there needs to be continuing mechanisms to assure that compliance occurs while quality is the goal.
Great. Thank you, Steve. So Steve, let you wrap this up.
Thank you very much, Pat. I think that the point that we are at right now is to make sure that we act in a meaningful way on the critical information that we heard from participants in our roundtable discussion. And we want to broaden the range of firms from which we are soliciting input. So in terms of next steps, what we are going to do is develop and conduct a survey that will reach out to a wide variety and a broad expanse of small, mid-sized, and even startup firms to raise many of the issues that we discussed during our roundtable discussion. And as noted here, that's going to require a little bit of crafting and intent to make sure that we are asking questions in a way that they are understood by firms that may be very familiar with the case for quality or may not be familiar with it and may not recognize quality as an endpoint that we have designated as a goal to work towards, even though in practice, that may be exactly what some, many, or few of these firms are actually focused on. This is going to be an ongoing process. So the people who were involved in developing the roundtable discussion are very much heads down now, thinking about what a practicable survey looks like and who we can reach out to get meaningful responses. Further, the group is thinking about what we can do with those responses so that there's a meaningful change with respect to case for quality, so that there is actual engagement and contribution to the CFQCC from small and mid-sized firms.
Hi, and welcome to our Case for Quality Forum here at MDIC. The next speaker, David Munson, is with W.L. Gore, and he's actually come forward to really share a use case that they've gone through that really does put together and demonstrate some of the ideas of the work we're trying to do with our advanced manufacturing clearinghouse and the benefits of the technology and the process they went through. So with that, I'll let David take over and run through what they did and how they got to their solution. And then afterwards, it'll be open up for questions and you can engage with them and really ask them more the hard stuff that went on their side. With that, David.
Thank you, Francisco. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Munson with W.L. Gore & Associates. I'm here today to talk about our recent project to implement a manufacturing execution system in our medical products division. My current role is sustainment lead for the MES. I also served as the IT project lead for this MES implementation project. I've been working in manufacturing systems implementation and sustainment for 26 years. Over the last 18 years, the majority of that work has been with Camstar Enterprise Platform, which is now rebranded as Siemens Op Center. During this time, I had the opportunity to work with and support a number of different manufacturing processes within Gore. For the last 3 years, my focus has been on providing MES capability to our medical device manufacturing. Summary of my experience. A little bit about our company. W.L. Gore & Associates was founded in 1958 by Bill and Vive Gore and has become the leading materials science company that focuses on applying the unique properties of expanded polytetrafluoroethylene to serve the needs of many commercial and industrial applications. The company operates with 3 divisions. The Fabrics division was formed after Bob Gore, Bill's son, invented EPTFE and discovered the unique microporous properties of the material. Fabrics division focuses on developing laminated fabrics for extreme conditions as well as everyday use. We are probably best known for our Gore-Tex fabric. The Performance Solutions division serves the needs of many industries. Taking advantage of the unique properties of EPTFE, our engineers are continuously innovating and developing solutions for the most harsh environments. We have filtration applications in industrial bag houses, keeping our air clean. Our wire and cable assemblies are in most commercial and military aircraft flying today. We even have our products on the surface of Mars. We provide critical components to the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries. We have venting solutions that are in almost every car and truck on the road. Your cell phone in your pocket probably has multiple Gore vents, protecting it from moisture and debris. The unique properties of EPTFE make it an ideal technology for human implantable devices of all types. Working with doctors and scientists around the world, Gore has developed a portfolio of products to treat many medical conditions, providing life-saving devices as well as general surgical products. A little bit about our project. In 2018, Gore initiated the digital journey to improve our capability and enhance and enable higher performance and effectiveness. There were a number of projects started across the enterprise, including a new ERP system, Siemens Teamcenter PLM implementation, and the use of Siemens Op Center in the Medical Products Division. MPD initiated the long-awaited MES project with 3 key objectives: establishing an MES platform that can be leveraged across the division, maintaining or improving production throughput, and eliminating the use of paper records and enable the use of digital production data. So let's unpack these 3 objectives a little bit. So we want to establish a scalable and sustainable platform. The platform needs to be scalable for deployment to more than 30 production lines within the Medical Products Division. It needs to be sustainable for long-term support of all the current and future manufacturing operations. The sustainability aspect of the platform is supported by Gore's long history using Op Center MES. Gore has used Op Center for over 15 years in the Performance Solution Division, as well as in its core technology development group, where it has proven its scalability as we rolled out on many diverse production lines. We have a number of in-house resources with deep knowledge of the Op Center solution and an established relationship with Siemens. Even with all of this experience, our Medical Products Division went through a vendor and system selection process and found that Op Center Medical Device Suite was the only solution that would meet the rigorous needs of the division's regulated environment. So we want to maintain or improve our current production levels. The PMA production line chosen for this implementation project has experienced significant growth in demand. The production team has done a lot of work to optimize the layout, procedures, and product flow to maximize efficiency. We had to show that we could implement the solution and do no harm. Implementing a system that required operators to do extra work and to slow them down would be unacceptable. This was a significant concern of our stakeholders. We had to prove our implementation capability and earn the right with our stakeholders before we could undertake a division-wide program to deploy MES. And we wanted to eliminate the use of paper, or master process sheets, and enable the EDHR capability. Paper MPS for the selected process required 22,000 physical entries on paper per week at the current demand levels, and demand was expected to increase. This was not sustainable at all. Humans being humans, these manual entries on paper generated non-conformance reports, due to those entry errors. It has been estimated that the investigation and processing time of these typical paperwork-related NCRs cost about $5,000 to $10,000 each. With our paper records, it would require 48 hours to 72 hours to assemble a DHR for review or audit response. In general, the use of paper MPS was just not sustainable. So how are things looking after 10 months of production using the Op Center MES? We'll get right to the good stuff. So one of our key components was we didn't want to have any negative impact. Post go live, velocity testing has showed some improvement throughout in most of the process steps. Our units per hour is actually trending up. The biggest win was in our QC prep area with an 85% reduction in process time with the elimination of the paperwork on day one. This has improved even more over time as the associates are more familiar with the system. We've shown a 20% reduction in WIP over the previous 12 months. Not all of the 20% is attributable to MES. We had other WIP reduction initiatives ongoing, but MES implementation is a significant factor in this reduction. We have seen a dramatic stabilization of WIP levels. We used to have spikes up and down. So there's no more spikes and dips over the year. WIP levels are much more predictable. We have an increase in associate satisfaction. We used a sim lab that was invaluable for giving the manufacturing associates a lot of interaction with our implementation team and the MES early on. They were able to preview MES and provide feedback, train to the system in a simulated production environment. The MES provides built-in process and data validation real time to the operator, reducing their anxiety about making mistakes. We can now produce an EDHR in minutes rather than the 48 to 72 hours that the paper EDHR required for audit response. We've seen a 45% reduction in NCRs. The MES implementation has practically eliminated NCRs related to production data entry errors or material labeling errors. All of our labels are now produced using the system with system data. There's no operator interaction with them. We reduced the scope of our NCRs. Previously, our process, raw material and components were issued to the floor, so we had traceability to what was in the manufacturing area when the work order was processed. Consequently, if we had a material or component problem, all of the work orders processed while that material or component was available for use were suspect and required quarantine. This could span several days of work orders, greatly increasing the scope of an NCR. The same was true for operators on the floor. They had a paper daily sign-in log to enable traceability to who was working on the work orders on a given day. Now associates electronically badge into their work cell and are directly linked to the work orders that passed through their cell while they were in there, and they are not associated with all of the production across the floor for the entire day. This has also helped with reduction of WIP. With the smaller quantities in a quarantine scope, there's smaller quantities set aside for investigation. Our second production line went live in September 2018 or September 18th, and we have a third plan for April of 2022, and we are in the design process for 4 more lines to be implemented in the next year. So let's talk a little bit more detail around the project. The first 6 months were spent forming up the business and IT team, developing the approach, and executing our current state design activities. We spent about 3 months developing the future state design, in which we determined all of the requirements we would be applying to the new system. In October 2019, we began our build activities and preparing for our first segment review. In December, we built out the simulation lab to represent the first step in the process and executed segment review 1 to demonstrate capability for the front end of the workflow. In 2022, we executed our second segment review in February of 2020 and prepared for the computer software validation, formal functional testing of the capability that we confirmed in the first 2 segment reviews. Then COVID hit and threw a wrench in our plan. Our functional testing had been planned as an in-person workshop in Flagstaff for the week of March 16th. Obviously, all travel stopped the week before. Over the weekend, we had to figure out how to execute our functional testing virtually. Using MS Teams, we were able to effectively execute the testing in the same 1-week time period without anyone traveling. The virtual formal functional test sessions for SR2 capability continued with the scheduled virtual test events in April and May. The third step in the process required the most development, culminating with SR3 in May of 2020. Build finalization, issue resolution, the test script writing continued through June and July, followed by the test events concluding in September and October. In September and October, we prepared for our user acceptance testing and executed that in November. Through December and January, we prepared the production line for go live. Production line went live on the last day of February 2021. So what does our implementation look like moving forward? At this point, we had earned the right and credibility to move forward to do a full divisional deployment. Production line leaders are now really banging at the door to be the next in line. We're taking a risk and value approach to deployment scheduling. Risk mitigation first, then greatest value gains, mixed with the low-hanging fruit for quick wins. Our completion plan is to be complete by 2025. We have to roll this out across the 30 production lines. It's going to be a huge lift, but with the platform in place and the program execution process developed, we can accelerate our pace to multiple deployments per year. We have a dedicated program team that is formed and to continue the implementations and sustain the business live on the system. We're also planning to implement MES, a secondary MES environment to support our new product development teams. This will provide our NPD teams with a number of benefits, including moving the MES capability upstream prior to commercialization, provide NPD teams with the MES digital data capability, support design for manufacturing efforts, and provide digital data capability to support submissions. We're actively working on equipment integrations also to further eliminate operator and system interactions. Machines will be executing the needed transactions in the MES based on conditions without operator action. Summary machine run data will also be able to be collected and be available for analysis or quality control. We're currently on Op Center version 7.8 and planning an upgrade in the next year or two. We're reviewing the potential to take advantage of new capabilities as well as the key element of maintaining our platform lifecycle. With just the base EDHR capability alone, our opportunity analysis suggests a potential savings of $30 million over the first 5 years during our rollout, and an additional $13 million plus per year after the program is complete. And that's just eliminating the paperwork and going to an EDHR. The soft benefits listed here are also highly anticipated by our business customers. Here's a few key best practices we identified and developed during the project. Our sim lab. The sim lab was absolutely superb for the operators. The transition from paper to system use on the production floor was a huge change for the operators. We developed a simulation lab to provide a systems replica of the shop floor to test and confirm our design and MES functionality. This was then used for demonstration and training for associates. The sim lab was found to be very beneficial for the users to get an early look at the system and provide feedback and generate excitement for the MES. We also developed a process for deep requirements analysis. For the production line, we conducted a detailed current state review of all the activities on the line to determine the requirements and use this information in the future state design for how the system would work. The requirements information was key in determining what functionality we would deploy and what new development was required. This formed the basis for the work with Siemens on the new functionality to configure the system. Our computer software assurance. We used a risk-based computer software assurance approach, which enabled less of an emphasis on validating everything versus functionality that is that directly impacts product quality and patient safety. We used an agile approach to the testing and captured functional test evidence in an ALM system. This significantly reduced our CSV time. Traditionally, we would wait until the solution was complete and then begin a functional testing phase of all aspects of the system, usually taking 12 to 18 months. We were able to complete the functional testing of this major system and solution in a little more than 4 months total time, broken out into test events. We collaborated with the FDA and Siemens on the rationale for submission for how we would submit the change. And the FDA accepted our rationale for an annual report notification instead of 2 FDA 30-day PMA notifications. So a little bit more about our segment review. We demonstrated the capability of the system to our stakeholders using segment reviews. These reviews were based on the functionality needed for the 3 major steps in the process. After the first segment review, where we demonstrated the work to support the front end of the line, we asked participants to give us a sense of how well we were meeting their expectations. They responded with overwhelmingly positive scores, as you can see in the upper right-hand side of this slide. We also asked what they might tell others if asked what they thought of the project progress and segment review experience. In the boxes on the slide are examples of the many positive responses we received. I'll pause for a second and let you take a look at those. To sum up the day, one of the best verbal comments we received at the end of the report out was a simple 4-phrase statement from one of the production leaders as he expressed his excitement for the system. No more pens, no more paper, no ERP transactions. We are done. there was a lot of excitement in the room when we got to this. So once again, we'll take a look at our results. We have no negative impact to the production line, which was the key concern of our stakeholders. We are seeing our units per hour trending up with no addition of direct labor. We have seen a pretty drastic stabilization and reduction in our WIP. We have an increase in associate satisfaction. In the past, we had cases where associates were really concerned and really worried and anxious about making mistakes on the production line. They were much more confident with the process and data validation that happens real time based on their actions. We can now produce that EDHR in minutes rather than 48 to 72 hours. That 45% reduction in NCRs is very valuable. Our reduced scope of NCRs, once again, improves our WIP status and helps us narrow down and speed up those NCRs that we do have to investigate. And we are moving forward with our production lines and have a good plan to go on with the rest of the division. And with that, I would like to thank MDIC for this opportunity to share our success story with you. And I hope you all will find some benefit from it in some way. And now we'll go back to Joe for questions.
Good morning, everyone. And I'd like to thank everyone for dialing into today's Case for Quality virtual forum and for listening in to the pre-recorded sessions that we had for you today. We're going to begin our live Q&A, which will be focused on the GORE presentation. So with me this morning, I have Cisco Vicente from FDA, our program manager in Case for Quality, and my partner in Advanced Manufacturing Clearinghouse. I also have with me Richard Vandegrift from Siemens, and a familiar face to everyone who just listened to the GORE presentation, David Munson from WL Gore. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're going to open it up now for live Q&A. I'm going to give it a minute or two to give the audience time to type in their questions. But as you can imagine, I already have some questions for the panel. And so I'm going to start with Cisco. And Cisco, you and I have spent a lot of time on advanced manufacturing and the Advanced Manufacturing Clearinghouse. But I think for us, this is the first opportunity that we've had to sort of showcase a case study in some of the tools that we've seen, that we've talked about. So from your perspective and an FDA perspective, what are some of the takeaways from David's presentation today?
Yeah, so I think, just to get things in the discussion here rolling, one of the things that I appreciate a lot about the presentation that Dave just gave was, the sharing of the actual value that was brought forth by the implementation activities. I think, for people who are interested further, the slides will be available. And Dave has also done a great job of sharing, what were things that they did, what were practices that they put in that actually drove a lot of the success they had. A better detailed guidebook. So when I look at what was done in the presentation, it does capture the intent of what we'd like to be able to do within the idea of the Advanced Manufacturing Clearinghouse, right? Support some of these efforts and these activities, provide anything on our end that we can do to help really clear any barriers or provide any guidance along the way to the adoption. And then, let's find out how this was done. How do we share the results, right? How do we help bring to light what the value proposition could be and how it was established and done so other companies can then replicate that. So I not only think it was a phenomenal demonstration of what the potential is of just implementing, the technology in the system, but I thought the whole real presentation, the work that they laid out and how they did things and what was shared was a really ideal demonstration of what we'd like to be able to do moving forward with other projects.
Okay, great. And so we've got one question that just has come in, and I think this may be for David, and I would imagine maybe a little bit from Richard's background as a solutions provider. But David, can you talk about your upfront requirements and that setting process, some of the challenges in identifying all the expectations of the system and prior to selection?
Well, actually, that was done probably back in 2016, before I was with the Medical Products Division. However, we did go through a pretty detailed process of getting high-level requirements from a business process standpoint, and then drilling down into the details, looking at the individual manufacturing processes and going through their current state and identifying all the activities that they do to make the product, to make sure that it's quality product, all of the testing is required. And we basically created a very detailed spreadsheet of what those requirements are. And then, from a selection standpoint, we can usually eliminate a lot of the options, based on those high level requirements. And it's in the details that we really make those fine decisions, fine tuning selection process.
Okay, great. And Al Kraus, thanks for that question. We also have a second question now from Rob Becker. This one's for David. So David, you maintained a pilot environment have you maintained a pilot environment to be able to assess new or enhanced capabilities prior to going live, or to make sure new lines will transition without issues?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Yeah, we are in a constant state of continuous improvement. So what we have in our ecosystem is 3 environments. We have a development environment for creating and testing new capability at basically a dry run level. We have a functional validation environment, which is a mirror of our production environment. Once we get things through the dry run testing and development, we promote to that validation environment where it is thoroughly tested, and we actually do our formal functional testing of the capability, and then promote to our production environments. So we are actually in a continuous state of adding capability based on the production lines that we are moving to. Not all the requirements for the entire system were developed for the pilot. We developed those the capabilities needed for that pilot line. Ideally, as we move forward with the rest of the 30 production lines that we have to go to, the number of new capability adds will drastically reduce after the first, say 5, 6, 7 production lines, and we won't find any new surprises.
Great. So David, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the concept that you mentioned in the simulation lab. I've had some similar experience with simulation labs, especially in an MES solution. Could you talk a little bit about how valuable having a simulation lab is versus maybe not having one on this journey?
Yeah, actually, this was the first time, like I said in my presentation, we've been doing this with Gore for probably 15 years, and this is the first time we used the concept of a simulation lab, and it was invaluable. It really enabled us to, once again, in our development environment, actually real-time test the capability that we were developing on a simulated production line. Basically, all the stations were set up with the systems in place. We had the label printers to print the labels that were required with the transaction and all those kind of things. And it enabled us to do rapid turnaround on capability. As we developed, we found what worked, what didn't work very quickly. We brought up key users from the shop floor, people who are going to be using the system every day, and walked them through using the capability in the sim lab and got their immediate feedback to do a rapid turnaround if we had to make changes. Sometimes they would come and say, oh yeah, but we have this exception in this case, and we were able to apply that in the simulation lab and very quickly turn it around. The other aspect of the sim lab that we didn't, we initially set it up so to do the development, but the other aspect of it was leadership engagement, stakeholder engagement. In many cases, when we've done these implementations, the leadership and stakeholders don't get to see what it looks like until we're actually ready to go live. In this case, with our segment reviews in the sim lab, we were able to get all our key stakeholders and our supply chain leadership and everyone in the room to actually see what's going on. And it was invaluable to instilling confidence in them, showing progress to them, really getting folks excited about it. I know that in a lot of cases in the past, there's been a lot of apprehension about, oh, we're going to a new system. Well, in this case, there was a lot of apprehension up front because this is the first time they've used an electronic system in manufacturing. Going from paper to the system was a big leap, but having that sim lab and being able to demonstrate our progress as we moved through was really invaluable for them. And then once again, from a training perspective, once we were complete with the build, we converted that sim lab function or use from testing over to training, and we were able to set out the user procedures in that sim lab, have the training champions move all the operators through the sim lab, so they don't need to be suited up in the clean room, but they can walk through executing their production in that simulation lab and really test out those procedures.
Great. So Marina asks a question about the NC process and the impact to quality system. So I'm going to maybe direct us to some of the data that you shared in your presentation about the quantitative value metrics and sort of the reductions that you saw in the NCR production line, the prep times. Can you talk a little bit about how what you covered in the presentation may address Marina's question around the NC process?
Let's see the question.
Yeah, I think it ties. So David, I think what it does is it ties together some of the pre-recorded sessions that we heard today and
right.
The Kappa improvement program and being able to identify, those, taking a risk-based approach to some of the Kappas, as well as the impact that your MES approach had on NCs overall.
Right. Yes. So the primary result we saw from a non-conformance standpoint is the overall reduction of non-conformances and the scope of those non-conformances. And from that regard, I think there's definitely a risk reduction overall. The content and the I guess the details within it, each non-conformance really it is where we determine the risk, and our Kappa team would do that evaluation. I was interested in seeing the presentation on the low risk versus high risk and risk assessment of Kappa. I think that would greatly benefit our Kappa team. I'm not familiar with their actual procedures and process that they go through at this point, but I do think there'd be benefit from it. From using the MES and evaluating NCs, I think our team has seen a much greater ability to determine risk from for an NC based on the data that's coming out. They can see exactly who is involved with the NC, what material is involved, and being able to assess the risk for an individual nonconformance is greatly enhanced.
Okay, great. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and look at Richard. And Richard, from the solutions provider perspective, when you engage with companies that are interested in this journey, what are some of the typical challenges that they need to help and you can step in and help overcome to be able to initiate the journey and then sort of the implementation piece of it?
Yeah, I might cover 2 points here. One, you talked about the simulation lab, and I think making that real for both the associates that were training and the leadership that was viewing what's going on was very valuable as well. When you see it versus computer software validation on, kind of just on a screen can be harder to follow. The second thing I think to really highlight, and maybe one of the challenges that we had here, was the approach to doing validation in a segmented area. I mean, it required a little additional management to make sure that functionality was mapping as we moved down the line and ready for testing. So there were some adjustments as we went through that procedure, but what it really helped and was that validation time not only was reduced, it came parallel with a lot of the development activities. So we were able to stagger those activities, and I think that helped the timeline significantly.
And Richard or Dick, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you had to overcome? I've heard you speak about the value of the right resources and the team support, and can you maybe talk a little bit about some of that structure and some of the challenges and how you overcame them?
I guess I can start. So some of the key challenges we had in this case, we were changing our process for development. We've done these implementations before, but in this case, we partnered with Siemens to actually execute a lot of the development work for us, and we were taking an agile approach. So we broke up the production line into basically 3 segments: the beginning, the middle, and the end. And we prioritized the design of the components for the beginning and got them into the build factory at Siemens, and then began the design of those components needed for the middle and the end to, once again, in an agile fashion, move them forward into the build or into the factory for Siemens build. I think one of the challenges we had coming back was managing the actual workload. When we first started, it was pretty good. Get some design work done, get those items fully designed into build, starting to get those build items returned, applied to the system, tested, and worked through that way. The further we got in that process, there was more interaction required, I think, and it was a challenge. And then we had COVID, thrown in the middle of that, so that changed the way we had to do that interaction. We were doing face-to-face workshops on a weekly basis, every other week, and as that work piled up, there were some elements of rework in there. It really required a higher level of agile attention. We ended up going to almost a daily stand-up to go through the item list, and it was just it became a challenge to track and maintain that. But we were pretty effective in the end and got through on time.
Great. You mentioned COVID, so thanks for that. That was actually a follow-up question I had in terms of what was the impact that COVID has had on. I think we've all experienced some changes in the way we operate, so I can't imagine when you have a team structure like this, working remotely certainly did add a challenge.
Right.
And Richard, any comments from your perspective on how the interaction with your group was able to overcome some of those challenges that Dick and the team experienced?
Sure. We, as you mentioned, we were doing some face-to-face meetings, and we had the advantage of building some of those relationships and that direct communication. However, we collectively had a very dispersed geographic team. So we were already, it was a natural process for us to have meetings like this on Zoom or Teams, and those just continued on. So that ability to collaborate and to be present in the virtual meetings already existed, and I think we transitioned fairly effectively to all virtual.
Okay, terrific. Cisco, from a regulatory flexibility perspective, as we look at organizations that are adopting the digital transformation approach, have you seen any increase in how companies are leveraging, maybe moving from a 30-day report to more of an annual report process? And is it too early, or are you seeing some of that, and how do we anticipate maybe if it is too early?
Well, I think in terms of what we'd like to do moving forward, some of this type of technology and the way it's being utilized at the company, it does make sense in some way, shape, or form to start thinking about that shift. In this case, they were able to reach out to us. We were able to really get the details of what the implementation was and work through the review team and determine, yeah, this is going to be annual reportable, which is going to help accelerate things. The idea of this being broadly done is still something that it needs to be worked on, right? It's still a bit more learning, a bit more figuring out where the limits of where something like that would be. But, the one thing I think that I'd like to highlight is reach out to us, right? Just the same way that Gore did, because we may be able to help clarify and where possible, streamline that path once we understand the implementation and the way the work is done. I think ideally we'd get to a state where we have enough confidence in these types of implementations to know that they're not going to impact safety and effectiveness, and that can be transitioned. But it's going to take time to get there and build up that knowledge base and data set.
And I'll move back a little bit, and that also, I would imagine, includes some of the work that's being done on the computer software assurance as well. Continue to reach out as we build cases and examples of how folks are leveraging the success from that program as well. And David mentioned that in his overview today.
Correct. I think that's helpful in terms of getting that speed and agility in the validation activity.
Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left, and I don't see any new questions. So I'm going to go and ask each of you, maybe kind of give us, David, what are some of the lessons learned from this project that you guys have taken away, and as you look to maybe expand enterprise-wide?
All right. Yeah, some of the lessons learned, like one of the key ones we found is related to the transition again from paper to systems. We underestimated the amount of time and work it would take to physically transform the floor. So preparing the production line for that change was something we should have planned for and evaluated much earlier. It requires the procedure updates, a lot of tooling marking where we're putting barcodes on tooling, the preparation of the floor from a hardware perspective, ergonomics, all those things. Once we got to the final validation and user acceptance testing complete, we started taking a look at preparing the floor, and we determined it was going to take about 3 months of time, based on, we got 20 hours of production every day, 7 days a week. And then when can we get on the floor to make those changes? What can we do in parallel with production? So that was a key learning, is plan for and prepare the shop floor well in advance. Other lessons learned regarding, just build capability is, outsource when you can. And we've got a really good working partnership with Siemens, and just being able to manage and control that information or the build activities using an agile approach and maintaining pretty constant contact. Like right now, I think we're on a weekly basis just to keep updated. And as the number of tasks and activities increases, you should manage that interaction appropriately.
Great, thank you, David. Richard, so maybe some tips for, and this is also a question for Cisco in the minute or so we have left. Sort of what types of medical device industry providers or manufacturers are you seeing engaging in this process, and maybe Cisco, how do they get involved? So Richard, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think people want to do this, and in terms of computer software assurance, there's an understanding and desire to move in that area, but there's still a little bit of fear on, we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we are required to do. So I think that's a transition process, and we need to keep communicating to it.
Okay, Cisco?
Yeah, so I think, we're seeing it actually starting to take place and take shape across various types of commodities in the medical device industry. So there isn't a a specific group that's charging or moving forward with it. I think piece of all that to really take away from it is, there's going to always be challenges with this. I think you heard Dave mention a few ones that were unexpected. We as an agency are looking to not be part of that challenge. So please feel free to reach out, engage, and we will try to be, as helpful as we can be to help move things along, because there is a benefit. I think you saw it in what Dave presented, not just for the organization, but in terms of that speed to just insight and information, right? What is it that is where I need to dedicate effort as an organization to drive improvements? How do I drive the improvements? The idea of understanding if the nonconformance is a higher risk, and then kind of applying that Kappa framework. The benefits are all there. We talk a lot about the paperwork reduction, and that's, I think, something that kind of hides all these extra benefits that come along with that.
Terrific. Well, David, Richard, and Cisco, thanks for your time today. That's going to conclude our live Q&A. Those folks that have listened in, we're going to take a break before we start the next session. So for those who've signed up for the Leadership Engagement Workshop, we ask you to rejoin us at 11 o'clock this morning. And again, thank you guys, David, Richard, Cisco, thanks a lot for your insights, and thanks for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.